All right,
Yeah.
welcome back to another edition of the Forts Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Inferna. Today we have the prosciutto paisan, Nick Ponzio, joining us. Nick, Piacere, how's it going, man?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Now, we have similar backgrounds. We're just talking here now. Celebrating Thanksgiving yesterday, were there any like Italian subtleties? Anything that was included?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
What was on tap yesterday for dinner?
Oh, so I mean,
Yeah.
normally for us, we'll have the normal Thanksgiving tradition things, like we had turkey and such. But you see these little sort of nuances that those Italian roots, like the hors d'oeuvres and everything like that, the side dishes.
Mhm.
We gotta, of course, have some gravy on the table, and by that I don't mean actual gravy; I mean actual red sauce. So
Right.
that's just kind of what it is with us. We always have bread and things like that we could dip in oil, and it's just the typical Italian thing. We can't ever have a sit down as a family without something
Sure.
like that with some bread and oil on the table.
No, we have the same thing. That's usually the first thing that my dad asks for, as well as the bread and some cheese and things like that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
prosecco with dessert, all that kind of
that's
stuff. You
right.
know how
Oh
it
yeah,
is.
lemon jello, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Nick, you literally blew up the world this year throwing the shot put. Now,
Yeah, I appreciate it.
you're welcome. No, I mean, coming, 21 meters. I mean, that's huge. 21:27, I think, right? Was the exact number. How but it took a little bit more to just like show up this year. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes, people just assume, well, he was a great shot putter in high school. He was a great thrower in college. Of course, he's going to be a great post-collegiate. But,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about like how, did anybody in your family, compete in track and field? Like, or did you just kind of like fall into it because you just fell into it when you were in high school?
So actually, funny enough, my mother actually did it in high school, and
Mm-hmm.
she went to a state championship for California and all of that, which was crazy because I didn't know about that till the end of my time in high school. But
Sure.
the majority of the time that I had spent in track was on my own. It wasn't any
Mm-hmm.
sort of familial sort of ties. So you see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people like Ryan Krauser and Maggie Ewan and people like that who are at the top of their sport. They had a lot of ties with their family, and that's kind of how they got in the sport. But for me, it was the very typical. I played football. I was a bigger guy. I really enjoyed strength training. Strength athletics was something that I wanted to do with my life. So going into a sport like track and field, where essentially you're throwing a weight as far as you can, had so much of an allure to me. And then once I had the availability to go to college and get my education paid for, that was something that was what I've always wanted to do from a very young age. In the sense of just getting my education paid for, not having my parents having to pay for anything. So that at that point, I made the decision to go that way. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, I was fortunate enough to pick it up pretty well, especially because I didn't really have many people in my life at a young age, telling me. I mean, I didn't even know what a shot put was till I was 17 when I started as a junior.
Sure.
So it's kind of one of those things.
And that's interesting. So you started as a junior, so you're like 17 years old. So when did you
Mhm.
realize like, wow, like this is something that I can earn a scholarship for? Like how long did
I
it
would
take
say
for you to figure
towards
that out?
Yeah, I would say it was towards the end of my junior year.
Mhm.
So when I first started, like I said, I picked it up quite well. And then by the end of my junior year, I had done well. I had taken like fourth place at a California state championship, which in California is like the entire state. It's not like in some states where they have like, single A, double A, triple A, or divisions and things. It's the entire state. So once you're state champion, it's the entire state. You're really the best in the entire state. So once I did that at the end of my junior year, I was like, wow, this is something that I'm actually pretty good at.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was pretty good at other sports and other endeavors. Like, I wanted to go play college football and I had some interest. But once my senior year started and I started to throw these like, more substantial marks and started to get a lot more college interests and started taking official visits to schools just for track, I was like, wow, this is something I could really do. And then in April of my senior year, when I threw almost 70 feet, I kind of blew the doors open. And from there, I got, like I said, so much college interest, full ride offers and such, I should say, that it became such an easy answer for me just to go and pursue that in my life, especially because I loved it at that point. At that point, I had such a passion for it
Mhm.
that going and doing that was a no brainer.
So what made you pick USC, right? So you're 70 feet, so you could pretty much pick it wherever you want at
Mm-hmm.
that point. So what was it, the allure of like staying closer to home? Was it something about the environment, the atmosphere, the coach. Like, well, I've visited USC. My brother was offered a scholarship to do
Oh,
some
awesome.
work out there way back when he was going to work on his PhD. So we went out there and they wined and dined him, and we saw the Heismans and the typical, and he was going for academics, like not sport related whatsoever. So what was it for you that made you, that helped you with the decision that you made?
So for me, actually, out of high school, I actually went to the University of Florida first for a year. That's where I ended up going. But ultimately, once I transferred, I was actually going to go to the University of Oklahoma. That's where I had pretty much made my mind up for once I was leaving Florida. And, because Coach Brian Blutrick, who's now at ASU, in my mind, we had a really good relationship over the phone. I was going to take an official visit. But once I got home, actually, I should back up a little bit. At that point, I was still in the back of my mind really wanted to go to USC. So as a kid growing up in Southern California, that's really where kind of my heart was lying, not just being back in Southern California, because obviously location didn't really matter to me. I went across the country for school, and I really enjoyed Florida. Florida as a whole, I really enjoyed. But that was always in the back of my mind, and I had been contacting Dan Lang, who's the coach there, and he's been there for, 32 or 33 years now. But that was always the place I was like, man, I'd really enjoy going there. But I had never really heard back from him. Out of high school, I never even talked to Dan. I was really in talks with UCLA much more than I was with USC, essentially because I had none. But that's where I always wanted to go. Growing up here, that was kind of a school that was kind of like, oh man, that's kind of the promised land, especially for athletics and academics as a whole. So going there and being able to get my degree as well as a good athletic experience was like, man, that would be perfect scenario. And I wasn't hearing back. So like I said, I was going to probably go to Oklahoma. And like I said, I enjoyed that school and Brian. So it got to a point where I finally heard back from Dan. And Dan was just kind of like, yeah, no, we had no idea that you were really interested. He's like, let's just get you on a visit right away when you get back. So the day I got back, the next morning I was on a visit to USC. And once I saw the school and such, my heart was made up. I was like, what am I doing? Going anywhere else would make zero sense. This is where I grew up. So the culture of Southern California and the and the weather and all these other scenarios that made training at USC and made thriving at that school such an easy process that it just became a no-brainer, like I had mentioned. And right from there, on that day when I was on my visit, I committed right then and there. So that's seeing the school, seeing the athletes on the team, that place being near and dear to my heart. That was that's what made that whole process of choosing USC and fortunately getting my degree and having the career that I had such an easy process for me.
So what was initial big differences between competing in high school? I mean, you're 70 feet, so you're the top thrower in the country. So you go to Florida, big time SEC program, and then
absolutely,
competing in the Pac-12. What were initial differences? I mean, because physically, you're throwing just as well as some of the throwers in the conference were, right, at the time. So
yeah,
what is there meet preparation different, team meetings? Can you talk a little bit about the life of a D1 thrower in the Pac-12?
Absolutely. So culturally, when it comes to the nature of the SEC, so when I was at University of Florida, it's very intense and it's kind of insane because it's almost so business-like because it's, the majority of SEC athletics, in my opinion, in any sport, football, track, even if it comes down to badminton, it's professional. It's you're at a level that other conferences just can't get to. So when I was at University of Florida, it was like, when you were going to a track meet, essentially you were going to a professional track meet. So going to the Pac-12, I had heard, oh, it's not the same. It's not as good. But once I got to the Pac-12, especially at USC with Carol Smith-Gilbert, she made that transition from one program to the other, professional to professional, a very seamless transition. She does a very, very good job. She's an absolute drill sergeant over there. She keeps everybody in line. She makes sure once we're going to meets, it's not about having fun and just doing your best. She's like, no,
Sure.
no, no, we're out for blood, which
Right.
a guy like myself, I very much enjoyed. I know a lot of people can see that and perceive it as, maybe it's a little bit too much but for me, I think that's why she creates champions and ultimately why she's reached the top of her sport. So for me, that Pac-12 going from SEC to Pac-12 was great because, we quite honestly dominated at USC because of the culture that Carol Smith Gilbert and Dan Lang as well created over at USC. So that process and being in that Pac-12 conference was it was quite difficult as well. I went through the years I was in the Pac-12 throwing wise. There was some very, very good competitions and some very, very good throwers that went through. A guy I train with now, Nick Scarvellis, he was an Olympian one of the years that we were competing against each other. And, you start to be able to set your sights much greater than yourself because you're going against these guys. So the Pac-12, just because it may not have the same allure as the SEC or some of these other places, it's not a conference to be trifled with in a lot of different fashions. So I was very happy that it wasn't, I wasn't like I was going from the SEC to an NAIA school. I went from the SEC to the Pac-12, and at that school, it was a culture that was of winning, and that's what I wanted. That's ultimately what I got.
So how then you have a great, collegiate career, and then you get to the point where you graduate, and it's like, was there someone that was kind of helping you make the decision, like, Nick, you're really close, the Olympics are coming up, maybe you should think about, you could always get a job, but let's try a couple more years. Well, that's what, like, any of the kids that I've coached that are kind of like at that level, I'm like, hey, you know what? It's 2 years. Like, you always get a job. You got your MBA. Like, there's always going to be something for you, but you're only young once. You only get that opportunity once. So who kind of helped you along the way in making the decision of, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. So my mom was great with that because my mom reached the height of her sport. My mom was a professional soccer player for multiple years, and she ended up reaching the '84 Olympics for the women's soccer team in the U.S. And so being able to talk to my mother for years and years about just being a professional athlete as a whole was great. It's different eras, so there's a difference in the times now when it comes to the not only perception but the actuality of being a professional athlete. But talking to her was always great because I always tell everybody my parents were my biggest fans and they believed in me more than anybody. So anything that I perceived that I could do, they were fully bought in, all in. So talking to them after I left college, because I left college, and I have mentioned this before on other podcasts and people who know me, I left college disappointed in the sense that I just felt like I could do so much more. And I felt like I had so much more in me, as I always do, even at 2172, finishing fourth in the world last year. Like, I still feel like there's so much to be had and that I still haven't even reached my full potential, which is an amazing mindset to have. And I think that having that and using it to your advantage, by perceiving it the right way could be so great. So once I left college, having that fire and the desire to continue to work really hard. And honestly, I probably worked harder than I ever have for where I'm at now and where I'm going. But realizing that, 2 years from now, there's an Olympic Games. And just because I haven't thrown the standard yet, or what the standard was, because at that time we had already all been told it was 2110.
Right.
I knew that it was more than capable. And, going from there and then going from college to transitioning to professional life, being able to finally start working with Ryan Whiting. Ryan was amazing with that as well. So, going from my parents to Ryan, it was great because Ryan is the type of guy that if you believe in yourself, he's going to believe in you, twice as much, tenfold. So it got to a point where it was this building process of motivation and intrinsic motivation and character development, all these things that made me not only the athlete that I wanted to be, but the man that I have become and will become. And that in itself made it an easy process to believe in myself and believe in the abilities that I have. So working with Ryan and then, having the backing of, my family and such made it such an easy process to continue this road, even when probably so many people in my life and looking from the outside, looking in, probably thought I should have been done and moved on with life. Because, so many people look at it like, I just want to start my life and maybe it's just not for me. Society thinks I should probably just get a 9-to-5 job and move on with my life. This is something that I've always wanted, not necessarily throwing wise, but I've just always wanted to be the best at whatever I did and achieve heights that, you kind of proving people wrong. When you're young, you always watch, Rudy in these movies, and it's like, proving people wrong and being who people thought you never could be is something that's such an allure. And being a professional athlete is what I've always wanted. And I've worked so hard in my life for whatever endeavor I did that I knew working hard for track that's the easy part. Like I said, that mental side of building with Ryan is what really has tapped into Pandora's box, I should say, to get me to where I'm at and to get me to where I'm going. So yeah, I mean, it's been great to have people behind me that I could fall back on and, with Ryan also look forward to, because Ryan's the top of his sport multiple times and won multiple world championships. So that in itself, and I know it's been multiple years since I've been to college, but at this point, that is really what has made that transition from being like, no, I can be an Olympian, and no, I can reach the heights that I want to do. And if I don't say, try to hype myself up, and if I don't try to do all these things and just kind of speak it into existence, but if I just put my nose down and work hard, it's going to pay off, which I think for any athlete at any level, if you put in as much work as you can and direct that aggression in the right way and have that motivation in the right manner, you could be whatever you want to be.
You said so much there. There's so much to unpack, but one thing strikes me really interesting. You finished 4th in the world in the shot put, and you said that you're still hungry. So like when I was a kid, I remember watching wrestling. I don't know if you're a wrestling fan, but Jesse Ventura always
absolutely,
this thing, the wolf climbing the mountain gorilla is always hungrier than the one on top. Like, is it just something like, our family's similar backgrounds, like we came from Italy, like immigrants, like, do you think it's just something that's ingrained that it's, I don't want to say like stubbornness, because that's what my mom says about me, but like,
well, of course, that's
right,
like as a whole,
right, that's what it is. Like, is that like, does that play a role in it? I mean, some people would be like, okay, I finished 4th, I could go get a job, I could go do, public speaking and motivational stuff and do all these things, but now it's interesting. Like we got, the Olympic trials are coming up in a few months, right? And then there might be another Olympics in 3 years as opposed to 4. So,
absolutely.
So with Ryan, like when you sit down and have these conversations, like, is he like, I mean, I don't know, like how do those conversations look where it's like, okay, you finished 4th, this is what we're going to do for the next, few months to kind of prepare for, for 21. Like, can you like pull the curtain back a little bit and like what that training's like how, not just the physical stuff, but like you said, like the between the ears, like what's Ryan like, how's he helped you with that? Yeah,
for sure. And I think that's really important. So I'll start off with what you had asked me originally. And because I think this is a very telling thing, especially for our Italian roots. So, my family came here from Italy with nothing. And, these immigrants that came through Ellis Island, these European immigrants, they came here with nothing and they had to build their lives. And they came here saying, no, we're Americans and all these sort of things. And it was like, what you get out of this life is what you put into it. And for me, because I'm trying to get my Italian citizenship, it would mean so much to me. And this is where I get a lot of my motivation from. It would mean so much to me. And it would be such an ode to my ancestors and the people who continue to come over here and work really hard to create the life that they want or have or aspire to have. It would mean so much to me to put in all the effort and all the emotion and all these sort of things into this sort of particular craft that I have and get the most I could out of it, if not the most anybody could get out of it. Right. So for me, that's kind of why I want to throw for Italy, because it would mean I would have so much. And it honestly would be for either way. So if I threw for the U.S. or for Italy, I would have so much passion for it, because for me, it's an ode, like I said, to the people that came before me, but also, the people that come after me. But with Ryan, to go on to that, I think, like I had mentioned beforehand, it's not so much, hey, you finished 4th in the world, like, let's be realistic about it. Ryan is so great at just being like, what are you looking for? And what do you want to do? What are your passions and your goals for this sport and for yourself? And
Right.
if you say, hey, listen, like I want to go and I want to medal at the Olympic Games, he's like, let's do it. Let's go for it. He wants to piggyback off of what you feel.
Right.
And I think for any sort of coach or athlete, they should be looking at that and saying, yeah, like why not? There's a big thing that I always say, like, why not me kind of thing. That's kind of something that if I ever have merch, I'm going to probably make a shirt that says, why not me? Because I think, so many people probably.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Oh, shoot.
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Let me see something real quick. Hold on.
Yeah, no problem. You should talk to.
I think they kind of cut out.
You should talk to Matt about having that shirt made for Hate Brand.
Yeah, sometimes these things just do that. But anyway, so for me, it was just one of those things where with Ryan, like I said, he's going to piggyback off of you to get you to a point where you could do whatever you want to do. Get you to a point where you can achieve all the things that you want to do, no matter what the goals or anything that you have. So for me, it was just it was such a simple process to just be able to be like, if I want to reach the height of my sport, I have nobody but myself to get, or I should say, I have nobody stopping me in the sense of getting to where I want to go, because I have all this backing and my own coach believes the same way I believe.
So when you finished up, or when you got the invitation rather to compete internationally this year, is there like a certain mindset that, like, you're going to be competing against the top 1.5% of the shot putters in the world
for sure.
every single week? Like, how do you, like, is it easy to try and get up for, I got a PR every meet? Like, is there like a strategy at that point of like, okay, this meet we want to try and get a series of all throws over, I don't know, 21 meters, or this one we're going to try and pop one, and then okay, we want to maybe 20-50. Like, how, like, what's the mindset like competing on European soil?
Yeah, it's a totally different mindset. So it's not so much, it does become strategic, because professional throwing is very much like, hey, every week you've got to show up and be your best.
Right.
Every week you've got to show up and you've got to be able to compete with that 1%. So for me, it wasn't so much like, hey, let's just try to throw okay here. Let's just try to do these things. You got to try and be your best every single time you step out there. So this year I went out to Europe, and that was my second time. I was fortunate enough to go in 2019 as well. And I hit the world standard in Europe, which was awesome. But this past year this past season going to Europe, I knew I could compete and win meets and such. So with that culmination of winning the Diamond League in Europe, it was also a reassurance of, hey, the work that we're putting in to achieve the goals that I want to achieve, it's really working and it's going to be there. So every single time you step out on that track, or in that ring, I should say, everybody else is gunning for the big marks. Everybody else is gunning for, like I said, if you're a Diamond League record, 22 plus meters all the time. So going into this next year, it's becoming at a point where you have to just be able to go and either PB or do your best in every single meet to be able to compete and be able to be competitive in these meets. And that's not to say, there's not periodization. There's periodization with everything. Periodization with, at a certain point, you're going to be on a heavy load and you're not going to probably be your best at this point. And periodization in the opposite terms of being, hey, you're going to be your best at this point. And you want to be your best when you need to be your best. But no matter what, you want to get to a point where your technical model and everything is so consistent that you're at a high enough level that no matter where you're at, you could still be competitive. And that's where you see these 1% of guys. No matter where they're at in their training cycle, they're still going to be very competitive. No matter where they're at, what they're doing, they're still going to be able to be in that threshold. And so that's what really that's what really makes a true professional. Absolutely.
So when you came back then, and now you're training with Ryan in Arizona, so you're in the desert. So what's the indoor season look like? Like, if there is an indoor season, do you plan on competing? Is that something maybe you're not? Maybe we don't share that right now. Like, what are the goals?
No, absolutely. I'm absolutely willing to share that. I think this year is a special year.
Right.
Because I think this year is going to leapfrog off the last year in the sense of, it's going to really show who really cared and who really wanted to be their best when,
things look so bleak and everything's down. So for me, I'm kind of just taking this last year and running with it into the next year. I think we have done such a smart job and a calculated job in this off-season training going into this indoor season within the next few months that I think that there's a lot of really, really big and special things on the horizon. But for me, I'd love to be able to go and compete in Europe as much as I could. I'll probably begin the season here in the States. When it comes to exact meets or exactly where I'll be at this point, I just don't even know because I'm still trying to figure out where things are going to be open, especially with the possibility of the indoor world championship.
Right.
But I'll definitely probably open up here in the United States and then hopefully get to go over to the European circuit as much as I could before a potential indoor world championship in China. So being able to travel and see certain places and get paid for it is ultimately the best part about this sport. So if I can make the majority of my indoor season that way, that'd probably be the best. And then, going into the outdoor season, hopefully making as many diamond leagues as I can, doing things like that. Like I said, continuing to travel the world before the hopeful, Olympic Games in late July, early August. That'll be the ultimate goal. I'd love to make the majority of my season, both seasons, I should say, out of this country. Just mainly because there's just such a difference in the not only the competitive nature, but just formats and different things here in the U.S. compared to competing overseas. We have such major sports here, like the NFL, NBA, MLB. These are sports that people really care about. And when you go to Europe, the sport like our own, they really, really care about that. So you start to see cooler meets, bigger meets, better paydays, all these other things that really go into it that make leaving the country and going over there something that you enjoy doing as well as want to do with your career. And, with the whole COVID thing going on, that does make it difficult in the sense of just being able to get over there is difficult. But I feel like with everything that's going on, if you truly, truly want and to get out of this season, what you're going to put into it, you're going to have to travel, especially when the top people in the world are going to be doing the same thing in light of the Olympic Games later on.
So with you mentioned earlier about the dual citizenship. So my brother and I have that because my parents were both born in
Absolutely
and things. So how does that, I don't know, like here in New York, you go to New York City, right? And you go to the Italian consulate. Like, I don't think you're going to be flying out to New York, but is there so like when you're in California there and you file the paperwork and what have you, like is anybody on the Italian side, oh, wait a second, like we got a potential, Olympic medalist. Let's maybe expedite the process. How's that working with the dual?
So there is a consulate here in Los Angeles on the West Coast. So there's I think there's possibly 3 of them in the country. There might even be a 4th. But I know for a fact there's one in New York and then one here in Los Angeles, and that's the one that I'll be going to.
Sure.
So that whole process has been difficult because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Getting an appointment has become quite difficult. But yes, I am in talks. Me and my agent are in talks with the Italian Federation for them to be able to help me get that appointment, get my paperwork and everything that I have all squared away, filed, and then just be able to get my passport. Because once I have that passport, I'm able to compete with them. And a lot of times with a lot of these countries, no matter what country it is, if you have somebody, like you said, who's at a point where they could definitely be in contention for either a medal or a really high placing and bring honor to their country, they're going to want as many people to do that as they can. So they do have a guy right now by the name of Leonardo Fabri, who has thrown 21.99, who finished 2nd in the world. So I would imagine for Italy, they'd love nothing more than to have 2 guys who finished in the top 5 in the world compete for their country, which they probably haven't had maybe ever. Definitely probably since Alessandro Andre. So that process has, like I said, become a long and difficult one, but it's ultimately got to pay out in the end because I think, like I said, there's going to bring not only so much honor to myself, but I want to bring honor to that country and to my ancestors and such by doing that and being able to show it as much as I can.
So what does that qualification process look like then? Because if you follow social media, some of the countries, like whoever was going to compete this past summer, they're automatically on, but you're different, right? So you can medal, there's a good chance that you can. So for the Italian Federation, do you have to qualify? Like you already have the standard. Like, I don't know, how does it work? Like how soon would you be able to compete in an Italian jersey, I guess is what?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I get my passport, it could be as soon as, that day.
Sure.
Ultimately, I'd love to be able to compete for them at the Indoor World Championships. I think that would be great. But as soon as I could, I'm all for it, because there's a lot of opportunities as well once you've changed your nationality to that country. So once I've changed my nationality to Italy, there's so many more opportunities that present themselves for me, mainly because how shot putting is in the US. It's by far the greatest country when it comes to shot putting in the world.
Right.
You look at the top 10, there's probably 6 guys within the top 10 that are Americans.
Right.
So it almost becomes very cutthroat to try to get into some of these meets in a normal year, because, you have 5 guys that could throw 2150 plus that, these countries these countries that have these meets have to try to be like, well, who do we want? What have they done right now? So being able to change my naturalization or I should say my citizenship to Italian will not only open up more opportunities, but will hopefully present themselves as soon as possible to be able to compete at a world championship and an Olympic Games this year, and hopefully try to, be in the running for a medal.
So for that purpose, for the Olympics and things, do you have to, you don't have to declare residency there, right? You still live in the U.S. and then come and go as you please, right? For the most part?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's one of those things where at the end of the day, if I had to declare residency, I would probably look into either investing in some sort of property there, especially where I'd be. That way, if I ever had to go over there to train, or if I had to go over there for any sort of natural or national team process, I'd have a place to stay there. There is a club that if I was to get my citizenship, that I'd probably be with, which is in southern Italy, which would be great. So that's probably somewhere where I would try to get my home base and everything like that. But yeah, once I have that passport and such, it's one of those things where I have become a part of the team. Once I talk to their OC and get that all finalized. And my training partner Nick Ponzio has had a similar process, because he throws for Greece.
Sure.
And he did that in 2016 to become an Olympian. And it's been really great for him as well. So it'd be a very similar process where I would stay in the United States to train. And this would be my of course, all the time sort of training facility. But if I ever had to go over there, I may look into getting property just to have some sort of residency. And in the sense, if that's necessary for my switching of the citizenships and being a part of their national team, I am not 100% sure yet. That's something that I'm sure I'll know once I get my passport. But at the moment, yes, I probably would continue to keep America my home base, just because anybody in the world knows America has the greatest facilities and things like that when it comes to training. And with the whole COVID pandemic, it's made a lot of these different countries, it was already difficult for them to train and be at their heights, but it's definitely made it at this point even harder. So like I said, being here would probably be the best for me to be able to thrive, because then I continue to train with Ryan and everything like that in person. I would still train with Ryan virtually if I ever had to live there, but I think at this point that would be just what's best for me.
So can you tell just quick, I don't want to take up too much of your time. How, you work with Hate Brand Goods, right? So,
absolutely.
So how did Matt approach you about joining the team? How does that work when you?
So I originally reached out to Matt in 2018. For me, I had always been a fan of the brand, and it was one of those things where I had known about them since probably, maybe because they started in 2014, and I think I had known about them since about 2015, because I've always been such a fan of strength sports. And when I was in college, all that stuff was very I was very passionate about, mainly because at a certain point I wanted to get into strength and conditioning coaching in different realms. But I had known about them since around 2015. And in 2018, once I had left college and signed with Velasa, which is my one of my main sponsors for throwing particularly, I had reached out to them and basically said, hey, listen, I'm an aspiring professional shot putter. I've loved the brand and everything like that. I'd love to be able to work with you guys. And at the time it was, I had a very small backing, not a ton of people knew who I was or what I was trying to do. So it was just kind of he had known who I was. So he was kind of like, hey, let's do a trial period and see how it was. And unfortunately it didn't go that well. But in this past year in 2020, I had just come off of, like I said, having that season where I had thrown the world standard. And I was having a much, much greater career, and I knew where I was headed was for big things. So I reached out to him and said, hey, listen, like, I know we talked in the past, and I'm working with Ryan Whiting now, and things are going really, really well. And I just want to, see if there's any possibility to continue to be with the brand, and have a partnership moving forward. And we immediately had a call that day. Matt Vincent, in my opinion, is one of the greatest guys when it comes to not only just being able to support strength throwers, because he has a throwing background, but just an overall great guy. It's been such a pleasure to be with Haight. Haight is probably my favorite sponsorship by far that I've ever had. I have multiple sponsorships now with some smaller brands and such, but Haight has been so gracious to me. They're so passionate in what I do and where I'm going, like I said, because of Matt's throwing background, that it has become such a breath of fresh air, because you hear so many times about sponsorships and such, and how it's kind of so much of a business-like atmosphere that it's very impersonal. But with Matt cares about me and what I'm doing, and he has such a great eye for talent that I think he understood too that where I was going was for big things, and winning that Diamond League and such. I've had personal conversations with Matt where he is so happy with where I'm going, and how I've been able to put the brand on the map worldwide, because I represent Haight all over the world, and I did that in my European circuit that I went on. So being with them has been so amazing, and like I said, that's been honestly probably my favorite sponsorship, not only because I think their gear and everything that they stand for and everything that they have has been incredible, but like I said, it's the personal relationship and him being able to support me and where I'm going that's made that insanely amazing in my life.
So do you think the Italian Federation, you think they'll let you wear the fanny pack in the Olympics, or what?
So I was actually talking to somebody about this. I think it was the last podcast, and that has been, that's kind of got its own life in itself, and it's got a little bit of a small fan club. I might even make its own Instagram page at this point. But I think when it comes to national team representation, I think if it's within your gear package, so if it's a part of the national team uniform, if there's a fanny pack in there, I think you can wear it. Because I've been told that, you can't wear, like I could never wear the Haight brand one on a national stage. But if they were able to make an Italian one while I was there, you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be wearing that on an Olympic stage, because I think that in itself it would be such an amazing thing. Absolutely.
So when you first started doing that, right, were people like, what is this guy thinking? Like, heaven forbid it comes off in a big throw, right? Because that's part of well, like my college kids, they want to throw in hats, and I'm like, listen, if your hat comes off, depending on who the official is, it's going to be a foul, right?
Absolutely.
So with that, like how, the first time you wore people just like, yeah, whatever, like who's this guy? Or was it like, oh, wait a second, like he's, or on the other hand, like, oh, this guy's serious, like he's going to keep his gear on when he throws, like what?
Yeah, well, you know what, it was almost kind of a spiteful thing. So a lot of the people that had questions about it, it was mainly, of course, because the way that I first did it was, almost facetiously. I did it as kind of a joke, a running gag. Right. But I had people, asking me like, what am I putting in there? Am I putting in snacks and such like that? Which, after I started getting questions like that, I started about thinking that more, and I was like, man, that might be a good idea to do. But I ultimately use it for chalk, and I think it's kind of a smarter idea, because you see so many places when you go to and you see competitions and such, you leave the competition, there's chalk all over the ground because guys have Tupperwares and such, and they're rubbing it, and it ends up getting everywhere. And for me, if I can keep it all in that pouch, it not only is economical because it saves my chalk for me having to get any more chalk, but it also just keeps the entire place clean. So I think with it being sort of a funny gag and people enjoying it, it's also been very, very smart in my mind for chalk. But like I said, it's taken a life on its own. Runner Space and a few other people have posted it on their Instagram pages and said like, hey, look, this guy's throwing in a fanny pack. And it's very, it's kind of a nod to the earlier days, like the 80s and such, where guys were wearing those much more often. But I've always wanted to bring the fanny pack back anyway in my life. So being able to do it in my career and showcase, especially Haight brand, because they have such a great fanny pack. Their everyday pack is huge. I can fit like 3 or 4 blocks of chalk in there, and I can fit so much else in there too. I fit my wrist strap and other things in there, but being able to showcase them and wear it is also a really cool thing.
So before I let you go, and you kind of alluded to it already, but just for people who might just listen to the end here, if somebody comes up to you, Nick, listen, I just graduated from college, I got a boyfriend or girlfriend, but I want to continue throwing, or like I need some life advice. What do you tell? What would you tell them? I want
for just in life or for throwing.
Well, just like for throwing, like Nick, I was like an All-American D2. Like I still have the fire there, but people like you said earlier, like, oh, they want me to get a job, or my parents this, or my boyfriend or girlfriend that. What do I do?
See what you're saying.
Yeah. So like, what advice would you give somebody that's asking for, about throwing and post-collegiately?
Yeah. The biggest thing I would say is if you truly believe, like in your heart, that you can reach much greater heights than you were able to achieve in either a collegiate system or anything like that, then I say absolutely go for it. One of the biggest things I tell people a lot is that, you're only young once, and you're only able to do certain things at this moment in time in your life. Life you have so much more time later in your life for life to kind of pass you by. But right now, why not just dig down and give everything you've got? I've had multiple – it's funny that you asked me this question, because I've actually had a good amount of kids reach out to me saying the same thing. Hey, I'm a Division II thrower, or hey, I'm a Division III or NAIA thrower, or something like that. And I get a lot of the questions like, hey, we have similar statures, because for me, like I said, I had mentioned this earlier, I'm a shorter guy, but I'm a bigger, stronger guy, and I move really quick, and that's, I think, what's made me the thrower that I am. But I get a lot of kids saying like, hey, I'm on the shorter side as well, and I get a lot of people telling me, that I can't do it, or I get a lot of people perceiving or thinking that I can't do it, but I want to keep doing this. I really, really am passionate about it. What should I do? And I tell people all the time, you've got to go for it. I've gone through so much of this in my life, not even just in throwing. I've gone through so much of people telling you what you should do, or people telling you that you can't do it. And there's so many naysayers in your life, and how cliche it sounds, it's the truth. There's so many negatives compared to positives when it comes to other people's perception of you and what you should be doing. But I think the greatest thing you could do in this life is dig deep down in your heart and really try to achieve what you really feel passionately for. So I tell people all the time to go for it. I mean, even if, like we had mentioned earlier with the Olympic cycle, even if you gave it a couple more years to the next Olympic cycle, like there's only, it's only 3 more years till the next one. If you gave it everything you had to that Olympic cycle, and even if you don't, achieve everything that you wanted to, you should walk away from this, not with your head down, but with your head held high, thinking, hey, I gave it everything I had, and I came out with it with everything that I could give. And I think that for me, I've been fortunate enough and lucky to achieve really great heights, and I think will achieve really great heights. But I think no matter when I leave, because, ultimately professional throwing and athletics will end. When I leave, no matter what height I achieve, I am going to be so proud that I continue to do what I did, and gave it everything I had, and didn't listen to everybody else, and stuck to my own plan and my own path. And I think there's so many people out there, because the sport, like I said, is not the NFL and stuff, that they look at it like, what is it really worth it? Like, even if I make the height of my sport, I'm not going to be making what these other guys are making. And you've got to have love for what you're doing. And you've got to be so, drawn to this sport to continue to do it. That I think that the people that do continue to do it, they continue to be blue collar like myself, in the sense of just, buckling down, not caring what other people say. They're going to find themselves reaching heights that they may not even have thought they could even reach. Because for me, when I could be honest, when I started with Ryan, I thought that I could achieve really great heights, but, on the precipice of 22 now and beyond, I'm achieving things that I never thought I could get to. Now I of course think I could get there now, and I'm fully, I should say, like, devoted to getting there. But I've achieved certain heights that I never thought, or I never dreamed be possible. So I think there's more and more people out there in this life, especially in this sport, that could achieve more than they even thought was possible if they just continue to really work hard and put the nose down to the grindstone. Because I think it's really true for the majority of life that you can achieve whatever you want to if you work hard enough and you're passionate enough. If a guy like myself, I'm not going to be an NBA center, but things that are within your reach, absolutely, you could be whatever you want to be. So that's what I would tell anybody doing that. Don't listen to anybody else. Don't have anybody influence where you're going. Don't have anybody influence what you should do or where you should go with your life. This is your life. It's whatever you make it.
Well, we can't end on a higher note than that. Nick, I appreciate your time so
Absolutely,
much.
yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time, and best wishes to you this season.
Absolutely, Charles. Thanks so much. I really, really appreciate you having me on the podcast, and this is one of my favorite ones I've done this far.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Take care.
Absolutely. You as well.